The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Stephen Halasnik, and I will be your host, as I usually am, for the Nonprofit MBA podcast. And this time I'm going to do something a little different in that I'm going to actually talk without a guest. I want to kind of share with you guys a little bit about what we are experiencing at our company in regards to nonprofits during the 4 weeks of the Trump administration so far. There's insights that we have that we're seeing that might help you in your nonprofit. And for those of you who don't know me, just to give you some background, of course, I'm one of the managing partners at Financing Solutions. And, Financing Solutions has been around for 14 years, and we're the leading provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits in the United States. Just so you know, if you want to look at our line of credit product for your organization, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. So, I don't talk about it at all because it's not really relevant to the conversations that I have on a Nonprofit MBA podcast. But over the last 30 plus years, I've built 7 companies. They've all been very successful. I have a business partner at Financing Solutions, and he's also run very successful businesses. We consider ourselves really good business owners. We treat people really well. And, now we're in the business for the last 14 years of providing lines of credit to nonprofits. We're using our own money to do that, which is almost unheard of. And there's a lot more flexibility we have by doing that instead of using investors. We really can kind of call the shots, which allows us really to work in this nonprofit area versus a bank, which, you're just never going to be funded by them. So today, what I want to talk about is a little bit about the Trump administration and kind of what we're seeing with nonprofits, of course. So to start off with, we are in the last 14 years, we've seen different cycles of nonprofits in relation to funding and how things have changed for them. In the first number of years, actually, I should say over the last 14 years, you've had in the United States the biggest increase in gross domestic product, the growth of the United States than ever in our history. And so there are many people who in the nonprofit sector have not experienced a recession because maybe they just weren't in a leadership role for the last, prior to 14 years ago. So, you're kind of used to this idea. And it's not just nonprofits. A lot of business leaders too are just not used to recessions and how that has an effect. The other thing that's kind of weird is that during the COVID years, donations to nonprofits went up when you would have not expected it. But when there's a recession that does go on in the United States, which was during COVID, so there was a recession during that period of time, the opposite effect happened. So nonprofit donations went up. And it wasn't until 2024 that what we started to see was that nonprofits were starting to get less donations than they had in the years in the past. And we started seeing that nonprofits were, starting to come around to the idea that donations were going to start coming down, and that they needed to really look closely at their budgets. We saw no effect in the amount of utilization of the lines of credit that nonprofits were using. In other words, what I mean is they were still using their lines of credit, and in almost all cases, smartly, using it for a shorter period of time just to help them through a cash flow crisis, which is really what a line of credit is used for. But they, a lot of executive directors started to see that in 2024 that donations were not going to be where they were during the COVID years. And then what happened was during the Trump administration in 2025, it really hit a lot of us by surprise. And I'm saying by us, I'm saying the American public, the nonprofit sector, and how quickly they move to stop funding from a federal level certain programs like DEI, anything having to do with woke, anything having to do with free speech, so on and so forth. And I know that we all know what I'm talking about. And it happened incredibly fast, so fast that executive directors could not respond quick enough. And what we saw was in the first quarter of 2025, we saw that nonprofits stopped applying for lines of credit. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying we saw a decrease in nonprofits applying for lines of credit. And I think the reason for that is everybody was in a wait and see approach of what's going on. And then as 2025 got a little bit more into April, we saw the use of lines of credit go down by 20%. So nonprofits started to cut back on their expenses and started to recognize it. But then what happened in April of 2025 was nonprofits were just like businesses. They were, let me correct that. What they started to see, nonprofits, was that their funding sources were being delayed in paying their bills. So if you were doing a lot of business with the state or you're doing a lot of business with the federal government, all of a sudden there was a large hiccup and delay in funding that was coming in, and therefore expenses, program expenses or payroll, which is a big deal, needed to be paid. And then nonprofits started using their line of credit again. And that's where we are right now. Right now it's April 17th as the recording of this date. And we're starting to see a lot more lines of credit applications come in. So I think when we speak to executive directors of potential clients for us, they're saying they're worried and they want to get the line of credit in place, and as we pitch it, just in case, which is, I think is something that I would do. I mean, over the 30 years that I've been building companies, I always tried to make sure I had a line of credit in place as an emergency backup plan. So I think that's a smart move. And I think other ones, and other nonprofits, it's just really starting to quickly realize that a recession is on the horizon, and that donations are going to be down, and what they will do about this. And I just think that you shouldn't. I doubt you're beating yourself up about it if you haven't recognized it right now. And the reason for I'm saying that is that this is happened in warp speed. This is really fast, and when I think about this, I think about what happened during 9/11 when the trade towers fell. One of the businesses I had during that time, as soon as those towers fell, I knew there was going to be a major change in the industry, not in my own industry that I was in at the time, but also in the economy. And so, it was a one type of event that I knew something was going to be very serious. And we went into a major recession because of that. So, this feels that way, where now everyone's starting to recognize, oh, this is not business as usual. There's going to be major changes. And the only type of leaders that I think know what to do are ones who've been around for 30, 40 years, and they've been through a recession before. So, and also it's just been so long since, in general, nonprofits have had to deal with a big decrease in donations. And, and now they're starting to recognize, oh, how will this affect my budget? So, I personally have been through 3 recessions in the United States, and the thing that you should know is it happens every 10 years, typically. And there are different effects on many different types of industries. Some grow during recessions, some really decrease in revenue. But in general, there's always a major change in normal operations, in the case of nonprofits, donations, and in the case for businesses, revenue sources. And in fact, nowadays, it just seems that there is no normal anymore. I mean, the cycle of business or donations, I know you haven't experienced it in the last several years, but the normal a cycle for donations or revenue for a business just changes so much quicker than it used to. It used to be like a 3-year period. It'd be steady. Now I feel like it's every 18 months, so to speak, every year and a half. And so I think, you kind of really need to be prepared for that. When I talk to business leaders or nonprofit leaders, on a different topic in regards to a line of credit, my advice to them is you need to be prepared for a decrease or a recession in the United States. And don't get too comfortable and expect things to change. Expect things to change very quickly. So don't get comfortable in your operation. That's one of the top things I say. And I think preparation really makes a big difference in being able to weather storms. And so, and I think that means that especially nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits think that they should be run more like a business. They want that anyway. But what you should give yourself kudos for is that we always see that nonprofits do an amazing job with budgets. They're really, really good at it. And when if you think that businesses run based on budgets, I haven't seen it. And so, they're not as budget conscious as nonprofits are. So, I think you need to use that as a strength and make sure you understand your expenses and your revenue sources really, really well. And then having done that, really practice what you will do, envision what you will do if things change in the economy, in your funding sources, and if in the amount of money that's going to be coming in, and practice where you will lower your expenses, where you will find new revenue sources, which usually often takes a lot longer to find than reducing your expenses. And then in times of crisis, make sure you're allocating your time to the most pressing areas of your nonprofit. The other thing that helps, I think, a lot of times is there's a lot of great solace and value in talking to other nonprofits on a consistent basis, having other nonprofits that you can get a sense for what's going on. So, having your group of people that you can talk to is very, very helpful. And, I know nonprofits a lot of times feel that their employees or their services are really, really like a nonprofit, that you're providing jobs to people. But, there is a lot of thought into the idea that you're of no value to your cause and to your people if your nonprofit has to close up. And so survival of your nonprofit is extremely critical. And I think you need to come to that conclusion earlier instead of later. Because the fact of the matter is, most organizations close down because there was no thought into the idea of this could get really bad. And what happens is you run out of cash. And when you run out of cash, you have to stop paying your people. And all of a sudden it happens all so fast. So, the other thing that you need to look at once you maybe reduce your expenses. Once you get really, really tight on your execution plan, is have a long-term view of what you want your nonprofit to look like in the long term. And during a time of crisis, I know what we're all doing is we're running around trying to put out fires. But at some point, you need to start looking and saying, okay, what do I want us to look at in 2 or 3 years? Because that will change the attitude that not only you have, but it will change the attitude of the people who are working at your organization. And that's something that's worked well for me. When a recession or a tumultuous period ends, the work that you put in now, after you've put out a lot of fires, will really help your organization thrive. And the fact of the matter is, other nonprofits in your sector might go out of business, and that'll leave more money for you in regards to donations, foundations, and other revenue sources, donation sources. And the other thing is, really focus your team's attention on what's really, really important, so that they don't panic. The fact of the matter is they're really worried about their jobs. And I'm sure they love your cause and they love what they do, but there's also not a lot of other jobs out there for them to go to. So they want to make it work as well. So, in summary, what we kind of saw at Financing Solutions is that nonprofits during the Trump administration were in a wait and see approach. And now they're starting to come through the realization that the business as usual for the last couple of years is not going to happen again, that donations are going to be way down, that the COVID bump isn't going to help again, and that you need to kind of ride this wave out. And it's always a good idea to expect a change in revenue to go out longer than you expected. And I'll just give you an example. I had this one company where I thought the recession would last 18 months, because that's usually what it does. And it did last 18 months, but there was an industry recession too. And in the industry I had been in at the time, the recession in that industry lasted 5 years. And it was just so long, the recession in my industry, that after about 4 years, I couldn't take it anymore. I ended up having to close up shop and move on to something else. So keep that in mind, that this might happen longer. And by the way, if it doesn't, that's great. And you're going to be ahead of the game. But hopefully, I've given you some ideas to consider. And I hopefully it's helpful. Of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com, and you can learn all about a line of credit and see how it can help your organization either now or in the future. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Good luck.